and welcome back to my channel. If you're a returning subscriber or viewer, welcome back and thank you very much for your continued support. It helps me to continue to create content to help others through their access journey. And if you're new here, welcome. This channel is all about my journey through access to nursing through Learn Direct, and I'll be giving unit by unit helpful tips and guidance on how to complete your work to the required standard. Please check out my other videos on my channel with an introduction to the access and from units 4 to 8 by clicking the link that you'll see pop up above here. So the format for this question is an academic report, and if you watch my previous video on Unit 5 Cell Biology, you'll note that you were required to write an illustrated report, and there are fundamental differences and some similarities between an academic and an illustrated report. So the format for an academic report is as follows, and you must follow the structure. There should be absolutely no images in this report as it's an academic, not an illustrated, and you do not need to have an introduction. So don't put them in there, otherwise this will result in an automatic loss of marks. You should have a title page, a term of reference, a content page, research methodology, and findings, followed by a reference and bibliography list. So a quick tip, when you're doing the contents page, if you wait until the end that you finish your document and you use Microsoft Word, it'll automatically populate this for you, provided that you've used headings and subheadings, and it'll automatically provide those sections into automatic pages for you. So it saves loads of time than writing it out manually. So question 1 is that you're required to write an academic report that demonstrates your understanding of psychological research. Your report must include the sections that are outlined in the assessor's guidance document, which I'll show you on the next couple of slides. And this can be found in the download assessor's guide below. Like I've said in all of my previous videos, it's really important that you read the guidance because that is how you will pass or fail. So for guidance about the structure and format of academic reports, if you're on a Learn Direct course, you can go back and look at academic writing skills. If you're on a different access course, either distance learning or through a college, they should be giving you some guidance and tips there. Indicative word counts for each section have been provided, and you must adhere to these. Relevant theory must be referenced, and you must include a reference list and bibliography. Your report will be a maximum of 2,000 words, and this is the absolute limit that you're permitted. So they're split into sections. So section 1 says that you are to explain what is meant by scientific methodology. So remember here that explain is your assessment verb that you need to answer. And if you're unsure of assessment verbs, if you're on a Learn Direct course, then you get given a guidance. And I'm sure that any other courses and colleges, you'll be given guidance as well. But if you are unsure on guidance, if you leave a comment in the section, I can email anyone the guidance that I was given, which gives you some really good examples and explanations on how to write those assessment verbs. So again, if you'd like a copy, pop your email, email in the comments, and you can email me privately, and I can send them off to you. So the example here says that you should identify what is meant by scientific methodology and the methodology that makes psychological scientific. Explain the benefits of this term and the validity of psychological research, for example, research designs and research methods. So the indicative word count here is 300, so you need to make sure that you adhere to that 300 word count. And like I said, you don't have to write an introduction here, so you can just completely ignore that. You get 300 words, so just make sure that you stick to it. You reword and rewrite as you need to. And again, I can't emphasize how important it is to make sure that you stay within that indicative word count. Section 2 is all about discussing 2 research methods commonly used by psychologists, one experimental and one non-experimental, and discuss their strengths and weaknesses. So there you have 2 examples of discussions. You need to discuss 2 research methods, and then you need to also discuss their strengths and weaknesses. Discuss the key points of one experimental method, laboratory, field, or natural, and evaluate the method. Discuss the key points of one of the non-experimental and evaluate the method. So if you're with a Learn Direct, you will get study materials which will take you through all of this, and I'm sure that if you were on another access course or college that you would get this as well. It's really important that you go off and do extended learning, so you read books or you look at academic reports or you look at Google Scholar is a really good one to use. Again, you've got 300 words, so just make sure that you follow that word count. So section 3 is a little bit of a case study. So it's really important here that you read the case study. So for example, it says here that Luke's the 13-year-old. He's behaving in a very aggressive manner at home. This is becoming an increasing concern for his mum, and she confides in her friend and her daughter Kate, who is never as aggressive as her brother. What is going on? Apply psychological understanding to explain Luke's behaviour. And then below, you need to explain why Luke might be behaving in this way using 2 of the following psychological approaches: biological, psychodynamic, humanistic, cognitive, and behavioural. So there, explain is your assessment verb again, and you need to look at these other ways that he could be doing it. You need to outline the main elements of 2 chosen approaches and provide an evaluation of both approaches by considering their positives and limitations. So your assessment verbs here are explain, outline, and evaluate. You have a 500 word count here. I'll take you on to section 4, and that looks at another area. So it says, read the following description about the Pomologic Effect by the Roosevelt and Jacobs 1968, a significant psychological study. And it goes on to read about the professor for the Harvard study and the principles there. So you can pause the video here and have a read of that case study. You're basically answering this question is this study ethical? And refer to ethical guidelines for psychological research and state the reasons. Another one is assessment verb here is discuss other research if your course material has led you to consider the importance of ethical guidelines for psychological research. And again, you've got a 500 word count here. So I'll show you my work and I'll discuss as we go along different sections. Again, an academic report has to have a title page, and for every section that you're having, it needs to be headed. So section 1 and then subheadings for each indicative section that you do. And that makes it easier for you to do the contents page, and it also makes it easier for the assessor to read your notes and just click on them and it'll take them to that page. So I'll take you onto my work now and we'll go through it section by section. So as you can see here, this is my academic report, and as always in my work I'll always put a header and a footer. Header has my name, the course I'm doing and the unit, and the footer is always the page number. So unlike an illustrated report, you're not allowed to use pictures here. So it needs to be very simplistic. A title, an academic report, obviously your name and the date that a submission was done. That's all you need to do for your title page. You're not allowed to have images. It's not like an illustrated report. I can't stress that enough. You'd be surprised at how many people upload a report and it has pictures to try and complement their commentary. It will just get you downgraded from a distinction to a merit or a merit to a pass. Or if it's that clear that you haven't followed the format at all, then you will get a resubmission. So you have to add a term of reference here rather than an introduction. And the term of reference is basically like an introduction, and you're just saying how you will be portraying the academic report. So I wrote here that this academic report aims to research relevant facts, providing depth to the concepts of the assignment brief. The contents of the report, with collated information from various sources, prove a competent understanding of analysing scientific methodology and psychological research variables with experimental and non-experimental methods, along with demonstrating analysis of physiological approaches and relevant ethical guidelines towards physiological practice. I'm just laying out what I'm going to be talking about and what I want to achieve by doing this academic report. You then go on to your contents page, and like I've said earlier, if you use Microsoft Word or Pages, you can put it in, and then as you do your headings and subheadings, you will have automatically provided your reference at the end for the contents table. So as you can see here, section 1 is my main section, and then I've done smaller headings just so you see what I'm talking about, and again that goes into the table of context. You're then asked to do research methodology, and I wrote here that the academic report contains secondary qualitative data from several reputable external sources, including academic books, e-books, resources, websites, and physiological studies. Relevant sources and a full bibliography can be found on page 8 and 9. That there just says how I've researched the information that I have here. So I've then gone on to write what is a scientific method in psychology. And a scientific method is a systemic approach psychologists use to confirm or disprove hypotheses. According to Cash, scientific methodology is preferred for obtaining and investigating information and observing behaviour and mental processes. A panel of experts will scrutinise the credibility of the proposed research by ensuring the scientific methodology has been followed, as detailed below. 1. They've identified a question for investigation, researched and gathered background information. They've formulated a research hypothesis or a prediction. They've created and conducted a pilot study, the trial hypothesis through the investigations and collect relative information, and they analyse the statistics of the information collated, and they interpret the data and draw a necessary conclusion, and then potential publication. So I'm not going to read everything that I've written here because it'll take too long, and I don't think anybody wants to hear me ramble on for like 40 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just very slowly going to go through. You can pause at any point, take notes, look at some of the references that I've used to give you some ideas of where to further research the questions. So like I've said, everything that I talk about has a subheading or a heading. And then I'm talking about variables in psychological research. And I've just talked there about dependent variables, externus variables, and independent variables. So feel free to pause through as we go along, and I'll just very slowly scroll through. Again, please don't copy my work word for word, because that is plagiarism, and it will get you removed from the course. It's really important that you don't plagiarise, because then you're not learning anything, and you're not learning the material that you need to know. I then went on to talk about what is independent measure design, and I just wrote a very, very, very small spiel on that. And then you go on to section 2. So section 2, as I showed earlier in the questions, was to discuss an experimental method and a non-experimental method. So in my methods, I chose to look at laboratory experiments and interviews. And I went on to write about how a laboratory experiment has advantages in that it's highly controlled, and some disadvantages in that it can be manipulated and things like that. With interviews, I went on to talk about the DVs, IVs, and things like that. Structured interviews are a formal set of closed questions for collating quantitative data. Unstructured interviews are an informal way to ask open questions. And then I went on to write about how interviewing is an excellent method to employ when a psychologist wants to achieve large numbers of quantitative data. So it's really important in section 2 as well that you give examples of positives and limitations of these experimental methods, as you do have to analyse and compare. So it's really important that you make sure that you do those, otherwise you're not answering those assessment verbs. Section 3 looks all about biological and behavioural approaches with Luke, who's a 13-year-old male, and you would have seen it earlier, you had the little case study that you had to do for Luke. And I just literally went on to write, according to Cash, biopsychology centres on the biological underpinnings of behaviour, including the effects of evolution and genetics. Charles Darwin is often hailed as the first man who introduced genetics as the key player in human behaviours, and that natural selection plays a part in hereditary behaviour. In addition, modern-day technology such as EEGs and CAT scans have been given by psychologists insights into how the brain and its neuropathways work. I then went on to go and delve into the case study, and so that Luke is a 13-year-old male. His mum has stated as an increased onset of aggressive behaviour. Presumably he's begun or is in a state of puberty. And although the limbic system has been linked to triggering aggressive responses during puberty, there can be a 30% increase in testosterone hormone levels that are often included to mood changes and increased aggression in adolescent boys, so on and so forth. I then went on to say that a behaviourist may hypothesise that Luke and his behaviour is created by associated reinforcement or punishments. Some psychologists may agree that behaviourism could have influenced Luke's aggressive behaviour. And then I've argued in my own lesson there, and I put it's arguably difficult to say which of these methods could relate to Luke's case study. However, the biopsychology approach would be apt to explain the biological reasons for his sudden aggressive behaviours, given his adolescent stage. Alternatively, behaviourism may be responsible, considering the previous conflict or trauma, internal or external, to Luke's home environment. This could have influenced his behaviour. However, further investigation would be required to conclude, considering one to be solely responsible would be too generalised. Both biopsychology and behaviourism have similarities, as they are both scientific, objective and measurable, and biological physiology can retain a high validity and reliability, as the reputation of behavioural studies is difficult. Critics have mentioned that biopsychology is too generalised in terms of modern day psychology as more and more complex disorders. So it's really important there again that you compare and contrast against your work and you explain a positive and a negative, and you explain how they're similar and dissimilar to one another and how they relate to the case study. So just feel free, like I said, to pause as we go along, take notes, have a look at my references, give you some ideas of where to further look and research. Section 4 looks at the British Psychological Society, and I've just put ethical guidelines to the specific study that they look at have due, which is the Plagiarism effect in 1968. So I'm just going to scroll through really slow, and feel free to pause at any point to have a little read. It's really important as well that you make them into paragraphs and that you have them in structured order so it all makes sense and falls in logical structural order. This makes it easier for the assessor to read it and understand what you're trying to say. And then at the end you need to put a little conclusion. So as you can see here, my conclusion is very, very brief. It's no more than 150 to 200 words. And I've just put that psychology has extensive branches that have been created, developed and taught through complex research over time. The report has discussed the scientific elements that prove psychological study and how to support reliability and validity from scientific methodological approaches. This report has also depicted how ethical guidelines safeguard the participants engaging in ethical experiments. Behaviorism and biopsychology approaches are fascinating areas of psychology to describe childhood behavioural development, and they both share an arguably valid scientific methodology. However, many other reasons of psychology could be drawn upon to diversify the study subject to develop understanding further. So again, there it's just a really, really quick and brief conclusion. And I think it's probably one of the easiest conclusions to write for this because you're not actually taking side of anything particular and you're just going off and saying that actually you could diversify it by looking to other regions of psychology, which I think it just broadifies the end example. And then at the end, it's always really important that you have a reference list. So anything that you've taken from someone else's work or from an online source, that you reference it. And again, it's important that you understand that you need to use the Harvard referencing in England. And if you're unsure of how to use the Harvard referencing method, YouTube is fantastic for that because people take it through you bit by bit and explain it if you're a visual learner. If you're more academically approached, then going online and having a set of instructions how it works and how you should set out your references can be found on there. Again, should be followed by a bibliography list. And a bibliography list is basically all of the sources that you've used in your reference list will be in there, and then anything that you've used as extended learning to read through. And I did quite a lot of extended reading here. So as you can see, it's about two pages or just 1 page. So again, it needs to be set in the Harvard referencing. And if it's anything that you've used that has helped you come to the consensus of answering your question. So that concludes my unit there for my academic report. And it's also really important to note that the questions could have changed if you're doing an online course. It may not want you to do it in an academic report, but it might want you to do it in an essay, an illustrated report, a presentation or a video presentation. But the questions will be similar. So just, again, pause my work and rewind it as you wish. Take some notes. Look at these references and bibliographies that I've used to give you some ideas of where to further research and understand the subject matter. So as you saw there, my work, you could see how I split them into sections and how I answered them. It's really important as well that you understand that this unit is a graded unit, which means that you will receive either a pass, merit or distinction, or if you don't meet the criteria, then you'll be asked to resubmit and you'll be given guidance by your assessor as to why. If you're over the word count or it's come up plagiarized, then you will receive absolutely no feedback, but you'll just be told that you need to resubmit. So it's really important, again, that you check your work. So I received a distinction for this, and I will just read through now my assessor's comments. So as you can see there, understanding of the subject, I received a distinction. You've included lots of relevant detail in each aspect of your report, and you've reflected well on the case study and other information provided to demonstrate an excellent level of understanding of the issue, perspective and approaches in this unit. Well done, Bradley. For application of knowledge, I received a distinction, and you have shown some excellent insight into the issues here, and your use of research materials have added much depth and breadth to your work. As noted above, a few more citations could have been included with aspects of this work. Please do continue to undertake lots of research to support your knowledge of understanding of issues in each unit. For communication and presentation, I received a merit, and on the whole this is a good report, showed that you have a very good command of structure, language, spelling, grammar, reflecting as so on. Well done. As noted in the main feedback, there are areas for further development here, so please make good use of the advice provided. Overall quality is a distinction. And then they give you a little personalised feedback at the bottom, saying that overall this is an excellent response to the assignment brief, and you've clearly invested much consideration into your work. So this is a well-deserved grade. Please make very good use of the advice provided before. And again, I've said in my previous videos that they give you suggestions for improvement, but this was really long, so I didn't want to put it in here because it would take up too much room and it'd take a long time to talk about. But it just gives you a bit of confidence, and it shows you where in your areas that you need to improve. And I always looked at any kind of suggestion for improvement as a way that I can improve myself. So I never took it as a bad thing. It was always a good thing because it showed me where I'm lacking in certain areas and where I can improve. Again, like I said, I got a distinction in this, so it's really important that you take the time, you review your work, make sure there are no spelling errors, check your grammar, check the way it's structured, make sure that you meet the criteria for the format, and that you answer the assessment verbs. So a quick thing here about referencing in bibliography is that just to be safe in any of your work in any further units, that you always provide a reference in bibliography. That way you're never not providing something when you should. Your references should always be in the Harvard reference method, and you can do that on YouTube or look at Google Scholar or Google, and they'll give you some really good examples of how to lay them out. A bibliography is your references that you've put in your reference list alongside any material that you've researched alongside to come to the conclusion or consensus of answering that assessment verbs. So when in doubt, always provide a reference in bibliography list. If it's not needed, it's not needed, but then again, you'll never not be providing something that you need to provide. So I'd like to take this time to thank you very much for your continued support and looking at my videos. It means a lot. It means that you're enjoying the content that I'm providing, and it just gives me a little bit of a confidence boost to continue to do these videos. So there are 21 units that you have to do for an Access course, and I plan on getting through them as quick as possible. Please like, subscribe and comment and hit that bell button, and you get notified when I upload new videos. Until next time, take care.